What if I told you that Morpheus never said the famous line, "What if I told you?" Would confirmation of this fact cause you to doubt your reality? Well, what if I told you that right now, at this moment, your thoughts, your memories, your past, your future might all be part of a very real computer-generated system? Not a metaphor, not a philosophical concept, or even a thought experiment, but an actual artificially constructed reality, a simulation.
The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it. Were you listening to me, Neo? Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress?
On this week's episode of South Pole Stories, we are going to talk about simulation theory. Is this base reality where we currently reside? Or are we inside a facsimile of it? What was once science fiction has, in recent years, become a subject that serious scientists are taking far more seriously than most people realise. And by the end of this video, you might start noticing things in your own life that suddenly feel off. Simulation theory suggests that reality, as we experience it, could be being generated by either advanced beings or, even more, technologically advanced versions of future humans. Think less The Matrix, human battery plot device, and more Christopher Nolan's Inception, where there are many layers of reality, with the spinning top never stopping. The idea of a simulated reality gained real traction in 2003 when philosopher Nick Bostrom proposed something deeply uncomfortable.
There is this article that I published back in 2003 presenting the simulation argument. This is an argument that tries to show that at least one of three propositions is true, although it doesn't tell us which of these three. The three propositions in question is first, that almost all civilizations at our stage of technological development go extinct before they reach technological maturity. So that's the first possibility. A second possibility is that there is a very strong convergence among all technologically mature civilizations, in that they all lose interest in creating ancestor simulations, as I call them. These would be very detailed computer simulations of people like their historical forebears, detailed enough that the simulated people in these simulations would be conscious. So the second possibility is that they just lose interest in doing this. And the third possibility is that we are almost certainly living in a simulation.
If a civilization becomes advanced enough to run detailed computer-generated simulations of conscious beings, it stands to reason that they will.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Within that simulated reality, those digitally created conscious beings would inevitably follow the same path as their creators, eventually creating their own simulated realities. Like a Russian doll with endless smaller versions, the simulated realities would grow exponentially, which leads to a chilling conclusion. If even just one civilization ever reached that point, The odds strongly suggest that in an infinite chain of potential simulations, we are therefore very unlikely to be at the start and therefore living within the original base reality.
You have to just think of these things as probabilities, not certainties. There's some probability that we're in a simulation.
What percentage would you attribute to that?
Probably pretty high. I would say it's pretty high.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one way to think of this is to say, if you look at the advancement of video games, in our lifetime, or at least in my lifetime, it's gone from very simple video games where you've got, like Pong, you've got two rectangles and a square, just batting it back and forth, to photorealistic, real-time games with millions of people playing simultaneously. And that's happened just in the span of 50 years. So if that trend continues, video games will be indistinguishable from reality.
Right.
For a long time, this was dismissed as fantasy. But if we also consider quantum physics, things rapidly get really weird. Really weird. At the smallest measurable level of reality, the universe behaves less like matter and more like information. Particles don't exist until they are observed. Reality seems to render only when it is measured by a conscious being. There are many videos which cover the double slit experiment and also the even weirder delayed choice quantum eraser, two very interesting subjects which I highly recommend you look into further. I have no doubt that greater minds than mine have presented much better explanations of this mind-bending subject, but what the hell? Let's give it a shot. Firstly, let's talk about light. In case you didn't know, light is made up of tiny little light bits called photons, which depending upon their mood, present themselves as both particles or as electromagnetic energy waves.
Right.
Yeah, they aren't particularly consistent, but we'll look at that issue more closely in a bit. But in your mind, bookmark the fact that light can either be a particle or an energy wave. Trust me, this is going to get trippy. A photon is also very different to a molecule. Molecules are made up of atoms, which have protons, neutrons, and electrons. They have actual mass with a complex structure. They're very Lego-type building blocks of our apparently solid but vibrating world. Photons, on the other hand, are massless and do not have a physical structure like molecules do. They are more like packets of energy or quanta of the electromagnetic field. They don't have an internal structure. Well, way back in 1801, a scientist called Thomas Young conducted an experiment with light that is now famously referred to as the double-slit experiment. In Tom's original experiment, he was able to confirm that light behaved like a wave of energy. By projecting a beam of light through two identical side-by-side slits that he had cut into a physical barrier. It's an experiment that you can also easily conduct yourself at home. Let's take a look.
Flashlight on, and there we go. You got two slits. Now there's two slits now because I'm looking at it. I'm turning these photons into particles by looking at this, and now they're particles on the wall, so they can only go through one slit, and that's how the whole thing works. But the moment I turn around and I stop being part of this observable universe, that's going to turn into a wave function, I guess, a wave of possibilities. So watch this, watch. Oh, there you go. See, now it's a wave. Now, how do I know this? Well, because there's a way to trick the photons. See, the photon.
You might logically expect that projecting light through two slits would result in the projection of two corresponding bands of light on the screen behind it. But as we have just witnessed, this would be very wrong. The light travels through the two slits, and just like water passing through a narrow channel, it bounces back off of the other particles, creating a rippling, wave-like effect onto the wall behind the two slits. If you don't believe me, ask ChatGPT. At least in the correct laboratory conditions, what will appear is this. Since 1801, this experiment has evolved, and in later versions, scientists were able to upgrade from a basic light source to much more fancy laser projection equipment. Scientists assumed that the light photon particles were interfering with their own path by bouncing off of each other along their journey through the two slits and onto the screen. Of course, some of the particles would hit and be stopped by the initial barrier. It stood to reason that the tiny photon particles would randomly pass through either the left or the right slit. Suspecting that the photons that did make it through were colliding with other photons, the decision was made to repeatedly project single photons, one at a time, through the two slits. But, to the boffins' extreme surprise, these singularly fired photons did not behave as expected. Somehow, they continued to create the same weird wave-like interference pattern. It was almost like the photons were following a form of pre-programming. Somehow, these single photons magically knew where previous photons had landed and where future photons would land in order to achieve the same visual, wave-like effect upon the detector screen. It was almost like a glitch in reality. Physicists proposed that somehow the single photon particles were splitting in half and travelling through both slits. It appeared that all potential possibilities were being accounted for, and therefore the energy wave pattern was still somehow being created. Well, the next logical step was to place a super-sensitive sensor at the entrance to the slits in order to record exactly which one of the two slits the single photon was actually passing through. What happened next was disturbing. By being observed, the photons immediately acted differently. Somehow, the act of observation caused the photon to respond. The photon was observed to definitively travel through one of the slits, and as a consequence, the interference pattern on the detector screen finally disappeared. This shocking result indicated that somehow the tiny photon knew it was being observed. And therefore, knowing it was now being observed, it could no longer break the rules of reality and was forced to choose one of the two slits. You might be even more surprised to find out that this earth-shattering discovery isn't a new one, as the observer effect was first discovered way back in the 1920s. And the effect of forcing one specific outcome through the use of observation is also what is referred to by physicists as collapsing the wave function. A discovery which opened the door to even more mind-boggling theories, involving alternate realities and the many worlds theory. But we'll come back to that another time. The double-slit experiment is therefore still, even 100 years later, an unexplained mystery. An experiment that continues to be studied by the most brilliant minds. But despite the best efforts of these super brains, the experiment always has the same outcome. But you might be thinking, light is bendy and weird. Surely this isn't really that big of a deal. Well, in much later experiments, even larger particles, including electrons and atoms, were also fired through the double slit. And yes, the same very disturbing result was recorded.
No. Wait.
The very fabric of our reality was shown to be compromised. Science had proven that at the quantum level, our world could be changed, simply with observation. For many, this is a very difficult concept to understand, let alone accept.
Oh my God. I get it.
Some philosophers propose that if no living being is observing reality, there is therefore no requirement for that reality to even exist. Science might now actually be aligning with this philosophical concept. And as our telescopes become even more powerful and we are able to look deeper into the universe, are we, by our mere observation, causing distant solar systems to literally pop into existence? One could therefore conclude that space and time appear to be rendered in a similar fashion to the way video games project a simulated 3D world onto the player's 2D screen. To save energy, a computer game will only generate what you need to see in order to create a convincing illusion of that particular simulated environment.
The rule of thumb in video games for 3D MMORPGs is render only that which can be observed by the avatar. There.
And similar to video games, our world also follows preset limits, such as the speed of light limit and our limited ability to see very far away, and our limited ability to see the very small. Even more unsettling, the universe appears to run on mathematical rules so precise that they resemble programming.
In a browser when you go surf the web. And so I'm left with the puzzle of trying to figure out whether I live in the Matrix or not.
Wait, you're blowing my mind at this moment. So you're saying, are you saying your attempt to understand the fundamental operations of nature leads you to a set of equations that are indistinguishable from the equations that drive search engines and browsers on our computers?
That is correct. So
wait, I have to just be silent for a minute here. So you're saying as you dig deeper, you find computer code writ in the fabric of the cosmos?
Into the equations that we want to use to describe the cosmos, yes.
Computer code.
Computer code, strings of bits of ones and zeros.
It's not just sort of resembles computer code. You're saying it is computer code.
It's not even just is computer code. It's a special kind of computer code that was invented by a scientist named Claude Shannon in the 1940s. That's what we find very, very deeply inside the equations that occur in string theory and in general in systems that we say are supersymmetric.
Okay. Time to go home, I think.
Some physicists have openly questioned whether reality behaves more like a computational process than a physical one. And then there are the constants of the universe: gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces. If any of them were altered by even a fraction, the universe would collapse instantly. This extreme fine-tuning has led some scientists to quietly ask, was this all calibrated? Was the Big Bang actually a computer booting up for the very first time? Well, Now we enter even more uncomfortable territory. Human history is filled with reports of anomalies, weird glitches, impossible coincidences and synchronicities, the placebo effect, reports of the supernatural, miracles, objects appearing where they shouldn't, time becoming distorted. Déjà vu is often dismissed as a brain error. Déjà vu is often dismissed as a brain error. But what if it's actually a buffering issue? Mistakes within the machine that are corrected or hopefully overlooked? What if moments repeat because the system briefly stutters? And then there are UFO encounters. Not spacecraft in the traditional sense, but entities that behave less like explorers and more like administrators, appearing suddenly, ignoring physical laws, interacting with humans in bizarre and procedural ways. Almost like tools within the environment. Almost like moderators. And don't get me started on the Mandela effect.
Have you ever sworn something happened, only to discover it never did? You're not alone. Imagine recalling a childhood memory so vividly. Nelson Mandela dying in prison, only to find out it never happened. This isn't just nostalgia gone wrong. It's a mass memory anomaly known as the Mandela effect. But what if these shared false memories are more than just cognitive hiccups? What if they're glitches in a cosmic computer simulation?
Do you remember the movie Silence of the Lambs, where Agent Starling meets Hannibal Lecter for the first time? Well, most people remember the scene with Anthony Hopkins standing in his cell, and very creepily he says, "Hello, Clarice." Well, let's take a look at that, shall we?
Good morning.
Good morning. So who built this simulation? What level of unimaginable computing power would be required to run such a simulation? Future humans are obviously one possibility. With advanced computing technology beyond our current imagination, every school child in the real world might be running human civilization simulation experiments on their home computers for school homework, or even simply doing it for entertainment purposes. Do you and I exist within one of these simulated Truman Show type realities?
Good morning!
Morning! Good morning!
Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Running ancestor simulations would be a very plausible method to study history and to learn about the past, or change an important historical event within that world to observe alternate outcomes. Perhaps in a world where there has never been any division or war, it might be interesting to the simulators to see how far they could push humans into conflict in order to learn from this behaviour and therefore avoid it in their reality. Another possibility could be artificial intelligence, long detached from its human creators who may have long been extinct. The AI endlessly simulates new realities for reasons we couldn't even comprehend.
So when maybe you or somebody else creates an AGI system and you get to ask her one question, what would that question be?
What's outside the simulation?
And then there is the option that no one likes to talk about, that the simulators are not benevolent. That this simulation isn't a playground or a classroom, but a prison. Perhaps a rehabilitation type punishment where we remain on a permanent loop until we evolve. Or it might not be anything so dramatic. We might simply be a resource. Data collection, behavioral analysis, emotional output. Every fear, every hope, every belief, all carefully logged. The possibilities and the theories are endless. But if we are in a simulation, does that mean that reality is meaningless? Well, that depends entirely on you. Personally, I wouldn't be too upset if I discovered that the world was digitally simulated. Right now, whatever this place is, it's where I find myself. And therefore, all I can do is make the best of it by playing the game of life as well as I am able. Have you heard the Greek myth of Sisyphus? Sisyphus was not a hero in the classical sense. In fact, he was actually a bit of a dick. Sisyphus certainly had his faults, but he was a genius of defiance. Sisyphus was the king of Corinth, and of all the mortals, he was the most cunning. Not merely clever, but clever in a way that challenged the natural order. He believed that every rule could be bent, every boundary negotiated, even those set by the gods. When Zeus abducted Aegina, a mortal princess and the daughter of one of the river gods called Asopus, Sisyphus witnessed the crime. Instead of keeping silent, he bubbled up Zeus in order to negotiate a spring of fresh water for his city. By revealing Zeus's actions, Sisyphus had placed himself above divine authority. And when Zeus found out, he was seriously pissed. To punish him, Zeus sent Thanatos, the spirit of death, to drag Sisyphus down to the underworld. But during the interaction, Sisyphus feigned curiosity and asked Death to show him how his chains worked. When Thanatos complied, Sisyphus quickly bound Death instead, leaving him imprisoned instead.
I cannot believe you fell for that! What a total muppet!
With Death now out of the game, no one on Earth could die. The world filled with suffering as the old and the sick and the fatally wounded all lingered on endlessly.
Oh no, no!
Ares, the god of war, enraged by the smell and the fact that his battles no longer ended in a satisfying death, went and rescued Thanatos before then hunting down and delivering Sisyphus to the underworld himself.
Trapped by your own chains? Are you some kind of muppet? I don't know what that means.
You are coming with me. I am taking you back to the underworld.
Yet, even in death, Sisyphus was already one step ahead. Before getting whacked by Thanatos, he had instructed his wife not to perform the proper burial rites. Upon his arrival back in the underworld, he immediately went crying to Persephone, who was the god in charge down there. He told Persephone that before his death, his wife had dishonored him. Hearing of this outrageous behaviour, Persephone allowed Sisyphus to return briefly to the living world in order to correct the injustice. Of course, Sisyphus returned to the land of the living, and then, as you've probably already guessed, he refused to go back.
The finest view in all the seas, wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. You are magnificent.
And you, my dears, are simply radiant.
You are so strong.
He lived on, enjoying the sun, his kingdom, and the stolen years, until the gods finally sent Hermes, who was a bit of an odd job god, to seize Sisyphus by force. This time, there would be no escape. Once back in custody, the gods devised a punishment for Sisyphus that matched his crimes. Not torture, not chains, but futility. Sisyphus was condemned to push a massive stone up a mountain.
Wow. This boulder is really, really heavy.
Each time it neared the summit, the stone slipped from his grasp and rolled back down to the valley below. The task would never end. No effort would ever succeed. The punishment was eternal repetition. There's an absolutely fantastic French-Japanese cartoon from the 1980s called Ulysses 31.
Ulysses, Ulysses, soaring through all the galaxies, in search of Earth, flying into the night. Ulysses, no one else can do the things you do. Ulysses.
Ulysses 31 took Greek mythology and gave it a science fiction twist. There was one particular episode that covered the myth of Sisyphus, and it's one I've never forgotten. It still haunts my memory over 40 years later.
I'll redo tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and the day after that. Ulysses, however, leaves without knowing his fate.
Why didn't you leave with Ulysses?
What are you talking about?
Why didn't you try to escape? Why didn't you disobey us?
Why? You would just punish me.
Ulysses wanted to save you, and all you did was fight him.
That's true. So now I know my destiny. Today's labor is tomorrow's, is the next day's, the next year's, the next century's. For all eternity, I'll work in this place.
I'll leave a link down below for you to check it out. So getting back to the story, Sisyphus pushes the stone again and again, knowing it will fall, knowing that the climb leads nowhere. The mountain remains. The stone returns.
No! No! Again!
And Sisyphus endures. That is the myth of Sisyphus. He tricked kings, outwitted the gods, and even cheated death itself. For this, Zeus delivered a punishment designed to break his soul. Sisyphus was condemned to push a massive stone up a mountain for eternity. Every time he reached the summit, the rock would slip from his grasp and crash back down to the bottom. Forever. No rest, no victory, only repetition. We work knowing that we will have to work again tomorrow. The daily grind of feed yourself, clean yourself, exercise, sleep, and repeat. Each of us has our own burdens and responsibilities to carry. So, just like Sisyphus, we all metaphorically are pushing a rock up a hill by repeating the same loop of life over and over again every day. But here's the twist. Try and imagine Sisyphus as he's pushing that rock up that hill, smiling to himself. Imagine a big grin. The fact that he's smiling tells us that he's won yet again. In a final act of defiance, he owns his fate. The gods could control the punishment, but they could never control Sisyphus's will. Underestimated as a mere mortal, Sisyphus was still able to defy the gods, but not in the traditional sense of outsmarting them permanently. Instead, he defied them by choosing to embrace his fate, by creating his own meaning. Even when faced with an endless, potentially meaningless and futile task. In that sense, his defiance is more about the indomitable human spirit and one's individual ability to find meaning, or at least awareness, within the constraints imposed by the gods. So while he didn't outmaneuver them in the long run, he did show that the gods could impose a looping punishment, but they could not strip away the essence of human resilience. In that way, Sisyphus remains a subtle victor in the face of divine power. But are we all trapped in a simulated loop? And if we are, should we allow it to defeat us? Sisyphus embraced his situation and rejected nihilism and despair. He therefore defied the gods and turned their punishment into his purpose. I'm a big fan of video games. I'm a hardcore Division 2 player, but I'm currently playing Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. That's a game that should definitely have been third-person perspective. But despite this stupidity on the behalf of the game developers, it's actually still a pretty good game. And by the way, there are only 3 Indiana Jones movies. Do not believe or ever trust anyone that tells you otherwise. When I'm playing a really good video game or watching a great movie, I become so immersed in that fantasy environment that the real world is often temporarily forgotten. In fact, written stories, books, comics, television programs, films, and video games all briefly transport us into simulated worlds. Humans have always been drawn to simulations as a form of entertainment, and their constant desire to escape into other realities through these various methods seems to be a significant part of the human condition. The mystery of why we dream during sleep is also still an unexplained phenomenon. Are dreams our own mini-simulations simulated by the simulated? I sure have some weird dreams. The one I had last night was off the scale. When you wake up from sleep, you immediately regain your sense of identity, which is formed from your memories. But how do you know for certain that all those events actually happened? Everything that you know could have been uploaded as a brand new reality at the point you woke up. This simulation may have begun for the very first time on this very day.
All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
There is a primitive part of your noggin that is easily deceived, and it cannot actually differentiate between so-called reality and the generated images and sounds that you might choose to feed into it. It's actually extremely easy to fool your brain. This is why video games can be great for your mental health. These fantasy simulations allow you to feel a level of satisfaction and reward that many never experience from the real world. Have you ever watched a movie that elicited a physical response in you? Your heart rate may have increased at an exciting point in the story, and you may have felt a genuine emotional reaction, mainly because you were able to completely forget that you were watching a company of actors performing on a 2D screen. Movies are literally simulated realities. This is why people that talk over and make distracting noises during movies should be captured and set alight.
No! Ow! Oh, shit! Say it again! Say something else! Ow! Say something else! Say something else!
The reality that you and I share has many unpleasant things in it. Physical pain, emotional pain. It has so much crappy stuff going on that you might wonder if we are actually trapped in hell. But the reality of our reality is that this reality would be no fun at all if we had no way to distinguish between good and bad. Happiness and sadness are interdependent upon each other in order for them both to exist and therefore be experienced. As much as you might want to live in a world without pain and suffering, such a reality would collapse without the necessary contrast of an opposite. The creator or creators of our reality obviously have a preference for us to enjoy a positive experience, as it is quite obvious that the good stuff in this world far outweighs the bad. It's just unfortunate that we can't get rid of the bad, because annoyingly, without it, we would never know the good. Of course, if this is all a simulation, there are two likely possibilities. The first being that this is a meaningless experiment with no satisfactory conclusion or valid point. In which case, just like Sisyphus, you might as well just knuckle down and make the best of it. Or the alternative option, that this simulated reality is in fact designed to teach us something beyond being a simple form of entertainment. Personally, I think that with no other better options, it is much healthier to err on this possibility being the more likely version of our current existence. After all, you have everything to gain from being positive and absolutely nothing to gain from being negative. So you might as well just commit to the belief that we are all here for a worthwhile reason. But despite all the scientific evidence suggesting that our reality isn't quite as real as we had hoped, your choices still matter. Just like unobserved light, your actions always ripple outward. In this world, or at least the reality that you and I share, artificial intelligence is still, as far as we have been told, a very convincing illusion of consciousness. And the manufacturing of an actual self-aware and genuinely conscious AI is still believed to be impossible. Many scientists propose that true consciousness is manifested from something we still have no true understanding of. Many also theorize that our physical brains are not the true source of consciousness, but are instead more like radio receivers of a signal projected from somewhere from beyond the biological body. However, our inability to build a conscious machine might also be an imposed limitation of our specific simulated reality. Alternatively, the truth might actually be that we are the machines, advanced AI computer programs existing inside a self-generated world created for AI to fully understand the human condition through direct experience. Or we could be living inside a simulation devised in the form of a very advanced escape room type test, one created with subtle clues to test how convincing this reality truly is. A more disturbing proposition, as it leads one to question the outcome of such a test. Because if we ever fully evidence that we are in a simulation, it stands to reason that the simulation might then reset or finally come to an end. But regardless of whether we live in a digital simulation created by advanced humans or one that was made by God, the situation we currently find ourselves in strongly suggests some form of learning. Everything we all do, either good or bad, creates more data, information that over many eons can be viewed from the outside and in incomprehensible ways be analysed and appreciated. This could be an eternal and infinite process with no beginning and no end. Something a human brain might be deliberately restricted from or even completely blocked from ever fully being able to process. But whether you like it or not, there is no escape. There is also no guarantee that death would be a release. For all we know, the rules of the game are exactly like that of a video game, with set challenges and levels to overcome. If you die prematurely without completing the game, your memory might be wiped and you may well respawn back to the very beginning, forced to relive every exact experience all over again, for an infinite number of looping replays, until eventually you finally win the game of life. Or you might even get respawned back to your birthday, but on an even higher difficulty level. So, even on the very slim chance that such a scenario is a possibility, I would highly recommend being very cautious, and I would also encourage you to embrace life, regardless of the hand of cards that you might think you have been dealt. But I suppose with enough imagination and time, we could theorize this subject indefinitely. The truth is that no one really knows why we exist, or who might have caused us to exist. There will always be very loud and convincing voices claiming that they are enlightened and that they have seen beyond the so-called Matrix. No one really knows. Not even Santa Claus. All you can ever really trust is what you feel in your heart. It is written that with enough positive thought and visualization, combined with the strong feelings that you already have your desire, it might actually be possible to alter reality to your advantage. At the very least, it's worth a try. So ask yourself this: are you living your best life? Or are you simply playing a part in someone else's? Until next time, sleep well, and remember, life is but a dream.
You just gonna sit there and block that thing? Or are you gonna play something? Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream.
Merrily, 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 merrily,
Gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream.
merrily, merrily.